7 costs of being a dark chosen one you must know. There's a strange calling that only a few of us ever hear. It doesn't sound like a voice. It doesn't come in words. It comes as a rupture, a collapse, a breakdown so complete that you're no longer sure if you're dying or awakening, and that's how it begins the path of the dark chosen one. It's not a title you chase. It's not something you earn through meditation or mantras or having your chakras aligned. It's something ancient, coded in your soul. You don't choose it. It chooses you. And when it does, everything in your life starts to fall apart, not because you're cursed, but because you're being reconstructed. Because to carry the power of the dark current, you must first let go of every illusion that ever kept you safe. So many people glamorize spiritual paths. They show the crystals, the peaceful meditations, the aesthetically pleasing altars. But no one talks about the costs. No one talks about the shaking, the screaming, the nights where your body convulses and your mind forgets who you are. No one talks about the isolation, the betrayal, the way your very presence begins to make people uncomfortable, because you're no longer playing the role they remember. And if you're on this path, you've felt it, you've lived it, and you've probably asked yourself, why me? Why this pain? Why this intensity? Why this separation? And here's the truth, because you are not here to be comfortable. You are here to become undeniably real, and that reality comes with a price.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The first cost is loneliness, not the kind where you're just sitting in an empty room, but the kind where you're surrounded by people and still feel like a ghost, like no one can truly see you, like your frequency is so different that even when you speak, others only hear what they can handle, not what you're actually saying. You try to connect, you try to explain, but your words carry too much truth, too much shadow, too much remembrance, and people flinch. They nod politely, but their eyes glaze over, or worse, they turn on you, because your energy threatens their narrative. And so you retreat, not because you want to be alone, but because you realize most people aren't ready to meet you where you actually live. And that's a cost, because humans are wired for connection, but the dark chosen one is wired for truth, and sometimes those two don't coexist. The second cost is identity death. This one is brutal, because the person you thought you were, the version of you that got praise, validation, love, that version has to die, not because it was wrong, but because it was incomplete. The dark chosen one doesn't get to hide behind personas. You don't get to be the nice one, the agreeable one, the successful one just because it makes life easier. You are required, forced to strip away every mask you've ever worn. And when that happens, a terrifying question arises: who am I without the roles I played? That disorientation is not a glitch, it's the gateway. Because only when the false identity dies can the true archetype emerge. But in between, you feel lost, rootless, alien, and the world offers you nothing to hold on to. Because this is the cost of becoming real. There is no map for who you are becoming. You're building it from your own ashes. The third cost is energetic hypersensitivity. Your nervous system becomes a radar for what's real and what's fake. You walk into a room and instantly feel who's lying to themselves. You hear someone's words, but your body screams that their energy is off. You try to enjoy a conversation, but your stomach tightens because the vibe is coated in subtle manipulation. And while others get to move through life numbed out, you feel everything. You can't unsee. You can't unfeel. You can't go back. That's the price of your gifts. Because your perception isn't just mental, it's somatic, cellular, soul deep. And it means that many environments become intolerable. You crave solitude, not because you're antisocial, but because your field needs purity. And the world is noisy, distorted, addicted to illusion, and so you unplug, you withdraw, not as an escape, but as a ritual of survival. The fourth cost is being misunderstood. This one cuts deep, because as you awaken more fully into your dark power, your language changes, your priorities shift, your energy becomes sharper, more precise, more unapologetic, and people don't know what to do with that. They mislabel you. They call you intense, intimidating, selfish, cold. They say you've changed, and they're right, you have. But not because you became worse. You became whole. And wholeness terrifies people who built their identity around fragments. So they push you away. They talk about you. They build stories in their mind to explain why they can no longer control or categorize you. And you're left standing alone, wondering if you're the villain or the only one telling the truth. And here's the thing: you might never be fully understood by most. But that misunderstanding is proof that you've left the matrix of performance. And what's waiting for you beyond it is far more real than anything you left behind. Let me ask you something that might shake your soul. Are you willing to be seen as the bad one, if it means being true? Are you willing to walk away from the comfort of being liked in exchange for the integrity of being sovereign? Because that's the choice every dark chosen one must make. You can't serve both truth and approval. You can't be medicine and be palatable. You must choose. And that choice exacts a cost. But these are just the first costs, the surface layers. The outer ring of the fire. The deeper you go, the more sacred and more intense the costs become. Because this path doesn't just strip you of illusions. It demands that you become the flame itself. The fire that never stops burning. Why inner death is the path to ultimate power. There's a fire that never goes out once it's been lit inside you. It doesn't burn like rage or ambition, it burns like truth. Unrelenting, unforgiving, sacred. It devours everything that is false, everything that is small, everything that was built by fear. And when you walk the path of the dark chosen one, you live with that fire. Every day, every moment. It lives in your chest. It lives in your gut. It follows you into your sleep. And while others get to numb out, distract, avoid, you don't have that luxury. Because once your soul has been initiated by that fire, it refuses to let you go back to who you were. This is the fifth cost of being a dark chosen one. You are never allowed to stay the same. You are constantly dying, not physically but energetically, emotionally, psychologically. You outgrow versions of yourself faster than most people can even understand one. You wake up one day and realize that a belief you held yesterday no longer fits. A relationship you once cherished now feels like a cage. A dream you once chased now feels like an echo from a life that no longer exists. And this is not a phase. This is your pattern. You are here to evolve in quantum leaps, not linear steps. But every leap requires a death. And every death feels like a loss. Even if what's dying was never really true. Even if what's dying is what kept you small. There's grief in this path that no one talks about. The grief of outgrowing people you love. The grief of realizing you've changed so much you barely recognize your own reflection. The grief of knowing that no one is coming to save you, not because you're alone, but because you're meant to become your own savior. You are the fire. You are the crucible. You are the one who transforms through repeated self-immolation. And that's a cost. A sacred, brutal, holy cost. But here's where it gets deeper. This constant death cycle isn't punishment, it's preparation. You're being forged for power, not the kind of power that dominates others. The kind of power that can hold truth without shaking, that can stand in the storm and not flinch, that can see through all illusion and still choose love. That kind of power is rare. It doesn't live in those who avoid pain. It lives in those who walk straight into it, eyes open, heart exposed, soul anchored. And that's you. You are being trained by the fire to become someone who cannot be manipulated, someone who cannot be owned, someone who cannot be bought with comfort, applause, or belonging. You are becoming uncompromisingly real, and the fire is how you get there. Have you noticed how your life seems to keep collapsing just when you think you found stability? How every time you build something, the universe comes in and knocks it down, not to hurt you, but to test you, to ask, are you attached to the form, or are you loyal to your truth? Because the dark chosen one is not here to build monuments to the ego. You are here to build structures that serve the soul. And sometimes that means your life has to keep falling apart until what's left is so solid, so aligned, so purely you, that not even time can shake it. This is the moment where many turn back. They say, it's too much. They try to go back to normal, back to safety. But you can't. Because once the fire has touched you, you can never unknow what you now know. You can never fully pretend again. You can never believe the lies you used to believe. You are cursed and blessed with knowing. And that knowing is your liberation, but it is also your weight. Because it means you are now responsible for what you see. You cannot ignore the misalignment. You cannot unsee the deception. You cannot stay where your soul is dying. And so you move. You burn. You rise. Let me ask you something that only the soul knows how to answer. What are you still holding onto that the fire has already asked you to release? What identity, relationship, role, or story are you still trying to resurrect, even though your soul has already buried it? Because that is where your suffering lies. Not in the fire itself, but in the resistance to it. When you surrender to the burn, it becomes a purification. When you resist it, it becomes torment. Your choice is not whether the fire comes. It already has. Your choice is how you move with it. And when you finally allow yourself to die over and over again, you begin to experience something miraculous. Clarity. Not the kind you think through. The kind you become. You start to feel a deep peace that doesn't come from having the answers, but from being okay with not needing them. You start to walk differently, speak differently, command energy differently, because you're no longer trying to survive. You're here to embody destiny, and destiny is not for the faint-hearted. It's for those who can live with the fire, not just once but every day. That's the cost. You live in permanent transformation. You're never done, never finished, never static. But in that endless death and rebirth you become immortal, not in body but in frequency. You become the kind of soul that shifts timelines just by being present. The kind of soul that others remember without knowing why. The kind of soul that rebuilds reality from the ashes of what no longer serves. The exile before the throne, why being rejected, is the final initiation into power. There comes a point on the path of the dark chosen one where the fire has done its work. You've burned through illusion, peeled off every false identity, and walked through the endless initiations of loss, death, and rebirth. And just when you think you're ready to step into your full power, something unexpected happens. You're exiled. Silently, brutally, sometimes publicly, sometimes only energetically. But the result is always the same. You find yourself standing alone again, but this time not because you're hiding, because you've become too much for the world you once knew. This is the sixth cost, the cost of rejection, not just by people, by systems, by structures, by your old communities, your old tribes, your old teachers. You start to notice how your presence disrupts even those who claim to be awake. You speak your truth and they flinch. You express your vision and they question your sanity. You live in your power and they accuse you of ego. You exist and it becomes a mirror too bright for those still hiding in fragments. And so they turn away, or worse, they turn on you. This is not a sign of failure. This is the final proof of your evolution. Because before the true sovereign steps into their throne, they must be cast out from every place that demanded they stay small. You are not being punished. You are being freed. Freed from the need to belong. Freed from the illusion of being understood. Freed from seeking validation from those who were never meant to walk where you're going. This is your exile, and it is sacred. But let's be honest, it hurts. Deeply. Because underneath the power, underneath the clarity, there is still a human heart. And that heart remembers. It remembers being the child who just wanted to be accepted. It remembers the longing to be part of something. It remembers the ache of being seen as too much, too intense, too different. And when the exile comes, it reactivates every wound you thought you had healed. That's why it's the final initiation. Because it doesn't just test your strength, it tests your self-love. Will you still believe in your worth when no one is clapping? Will you still stand in your vision when no one is standing beside you? Will you still speak your truth when every echo around you is silent? This is the part where most people give up. They compromise. They dim. They go back to safe circles, flatter frequencies, watered-down truths. They trade their throne for a seat at someone else's table. But you didn't come this far to abandon yourself now. You didn't survive the fire to beg for belonging. You came to build the temple that doesn't yet exist. And that temple begins inside you. Let me ask you something real. Can you handle your own magnitude? Not the curated version. Not the socially acceptable version. The full, sovereign, unapologetic force of who you are? Because that's what exile asks of you. It asks you to look in the mirror with no one watching, no one clapping, no one affirming, and still choose to rise. Still choose to speak. Still choose to create. Even if your voice shakes, even if your hands tremble, even if the world calls you mad. Do you know what happens when you pass this gate? When you stop seeking re-entry into places you've outgrown, you begin to attract the future, not the one you hoped for, the one that was written. The people who resonate with your actual frequency begin to appear, not because you chased them, because your exile purified you. It cleared the static, it removed the noise, and now your signal is clean. And those who are meant to find you will hear it not with their ears, but with their soul. But here's the twist: by the time they arrive, you no longer need them. You want them. You welcome them, but you are no longer seeking, because you become what you once looked for. You've become the frequency you used to chase. You've become the very temple you thought you needed to find. And that is the true throne, not a place, not a title, not a following. It's the state of being that no longer flinches in the face of solitude, that no longer waits to be invited, that no longer dims to fit into a room that was never built to hold your light. This kind of sovereignty can't be taught. It must be earned, through fire, through loss, through exile. And when you finally sit in it, not out of arrogance, but out of deep remembrance, the entire universe begins to rearrange around your presence, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. And now, something ancient stirs in your blood. You're no longer trying to be chosen. You are the chooser. You choose your words. You choose your path. You choose your energy. You choose your destiny. And that choice is no longer influenced by the crowd, by the tribe, or by the fear of being alone. Because you've already walked through the worst of it and survived. Not just survived. Transformed. And now you are ready to lead, not from ego, but from essence. The price of walking as a god in a human world, and why it's worth everything. By the time you've walked through the fire, endured the exile, and died 1,000 inner deaths, something irreversible happens. You awaken not just to your potential, not just to your purpose, but to your divinity. Not in the way the world teaches, some distant, sanitized idea of holiness, but in the raw, embodied realization that the same force that created stars now breathes through you. This is not metaphor. It's not philosophy. It's remembrance. You no longer believe in a higher power, you are the expression of it. And that is the seventh cost of being a dark chosen one. You pay the price of walking as a god in a human world. And what a price it is. It's one thing to awaken. It's another thing entirely to live awakened in a world still addicted to sleep. Because once you carry that much light and shadow integrated as one, you become a living disruption. Your presence alone confronts, not intentionally, not because you're trying to, but because your vibration makes people feel everything they've buried. And they don't always thank you for it. They project. They sabotage. They leave. Or they worship you another trap. Because the human world doesn't know how to meet God energy with reverence. It meets it with either resistance or idolatry, and both are distortions. You will be misunderstood, not just occasionally but consistently, because you no longer speak the language of fear, and fear is the dominant dialect of this world. You no longer operate from guilt, shame, or scarcity. You no longer trade your power for permission, and that makes you incomprehensible to those still playing the game. They'll try to define you, label you, reduce you. But how do you define a force that contains all things? You don't. You experience it, and the few who are ready will feel you, not with their minds, but with their souls. But it's lonely. Let's be honest. When you walk through life carrying the remembrance of your own divinity, you can't pretend. You can't engage in small talk when your soul wants to speak in fire. You can't stay in shallow relationships when your heart is an ocean. You can't work for systems that are built on illusion when your very being radiates truth. You become incompatible with normal, with average, with artificial, and so you walk alone, not as punishment but as initiation, because gods are not born in crowds. They are forged in isolation. Still, there's a deeper reward, a secret only the brave discover. When you fully embody your divinity, not in arrogance, but in awe, you realize something breathtaking. You are free. Free in a way that no one can give you and no one can take away. Free from the need to be liked. Free from the fear of being too much. Free from the illusion that anything outside you can define your worth. You are free because you finally remembered who you are. And in that remembrance, you become untouchable, not because nothing hurts you, but because nothing owns you. So let me ask you a final question. Can you let go of needing to be understood, loved, or accepted in order to fully become who you are? Can you walk through this human world, not needing it to validate your godhood, because you've already validated it within? That's the final test. That's the final cost. To stop asking the world to see you and to start seeing yourself so clearly, so powerfully, that no shadow can ever make you question your light again. You are not here to fit in. You are not here to be palatable. You are not here to be a diluted version of your infinite self. You are here to embody the totality of your being. And that embodiment will cost you everything you thought you needed and give you everything you truly came for. Because in the end, the path of the dark chosen one is not about being feared or worshipped, excluded or praised. It's about becoming so whole, so clear, so alive, that your very existence becomes a transmission. Not a message that says, follow me, but one that says, remember who you are. And when you live like that, you don't just change lives. You change the entire frequency of the planet. That's the cost. That's the reward. And that's the legacy. You're not walking this path to be recognized. You're walking this path to remember. And now you have.